Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump's threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act to send active-duty military personnel to Minnesota, where large-scale protests continue to resist the Trump administration's surge of thousands of federal immigration agents into the Twin Cities region. Writing on his social media platform, Trump claimed professional agitators and insurrectionists, unquote, were, quote, attacking the patriots of ICE who are only trying to do their job, unquote. Trump's threat came as 3 children were hospitalized for tear gas inhalation after federal agents surrounded a car carrying a family of 8 Wednesday evening as they were attempting to drive to their home in North Minneapolis. Witnesses say the agents deployed concussion grenades and tear gas, with at least one device rolling under the family's van, where it exploded, set off its airbags, and began filling the vehicle with toxic smoke. Bystanders then rushed to help pull the family from the van as the children inside gasped for air. Destiny Jackson told TV station KMSP her 6-month-old infant stopped breathing and lost consciousness.
When we did finally get out the car, of course, my baby was lifeless, so I did do the CPR and mouth to mouth, and there was multiple people in the house who were pouring milk all over my other kid's face and trying to get the tear gas off of them.
On Thursday, federal agents fired tear gas outside the federal building in Minneapolis, where ICE detainees are being jailed. Former prisoners there say they were tightly packed into a large holding cell, denied requests for water or use of a toilet, and witnessed other prisoners with untreated injuries. Meanwhile, ICE's actions have devastated Twin Cities businesses run by or patronized by immigrants. This is Luis Reyes Rojas, owner of Pineda Tacos.
Our last resort is to go down to the basement, to the office, and hide ourselves. That's what we're doing. It's worse than war. We have a plan A, plan B, and plan C because we don't know how much longer we can endure this.
The American Civil Liberties Union has filed a class action lawsuit over the Trump administration's surge of immigration agents to Minnesota, describing it as a mass racial profiling campaign resulting in an unprecedented level of violence against Minnesotans of color. The lawsuit reads in part, quote, people targeted by ICE have been handcuffed, tackled, and beaten by federal agents. Agents have broken car windows, dragged people from their cars, and used pepper spray and tear gas against compliant, nonviolent people, unquote. This comes as a federal judge in Minnesota Thursday ordered the release of a Liberian man, ruling that heavily armed immigration agents violated his Fourth Amendment rights when they broke into his home using a battering ram without his consent and without a judicial warrant. Newly released records from the Minneapolis police and fire departments reveal that Renee Good, the 37-year-old mother of 3 killed by an ICE agent last week, suffered 2 gunshot wounds to her chest, 1 to her forearm, and a possible gunshot wound to the left side of her head. The records reveal Good was not breathing and had an irregular pulse when first responders, who were delayed by federal agents and had to approach on foot, finally reached her. Blood was flowing from her left ear. Her pupils were dilated. Medics performed CPR on Good until they arrived at the Hennepin County Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead. The death of a Cuban immigrant who was jailed in an ICE detention camp in Texas was likely a homicide. That's according to the Washington Post, which reported El Paso County's medical examiner found the preliminary cause of death for 55-year-old Geraldo Lunas Campos was, quote, asphyxia due to neck and chest compression. Lunas Campos was arrested last July, pronounced dead on January 3rd at Camp East Montana, a sprawling immigration detention tent camp at the Fort Bliss military base in El Paso. ICE claimed the Cuban father had died after, quote, experiencing medical distress, unquote. But El Paso officials reportedly told his daughter they'll likely rule his death a homicide pending a toxicology report. Lunas Campos is one of 4 immigrants who died in ICE custody during just the first 10 days of this year. The Pentagon said Thursday it's moving a carrier strike group toward the Middle East as the Trump administration continues to threaten airstrikes against Iran. The USS Abraham Lincoln and accompanying warships and aircraft are currently in the Indo-Pacific region and should take about a week to reposition. On Thursday, the White House said, quote, all options remain on the table, unquote, as it announced new sanctions against Iran, citing the ongoing crackdown on anti-government protesters. This as the head of Israel's Mossad intelligence service, David Barnea, is in the United States with plans to meet Trump's Mideast envoy, Steve Witkoff, in Miami. At the United Nations, Iran's deputy UN ambassador said any attack would be a violation of the UN Charter and said his nation is prepared to fight back.
Iran seeks neither escalation nor confrontation. However, any act of aggression, direct or indirect, will be met with a decisive, proportionate, and lawful response.
U.S. forces have seized another oil tanker with ties to Venezuela in the Caribbean. This is the sixth vessel to be captured by the Trump administration as part of a broader campaign to control Venezuela's oil industry since a U.S. military strike earlier this month led to the abduction of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife from Caracas. Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, is increasingly collaborating with the Trump administration. On Thursday, Rodriguez announced she'd moved to propose a reform in Venezuela's hydrocarbon law, which would facilitate U.S. and foreign investors to access Venezuela's oil. This comes as protests against U.S. imperialism have spread across the region. Demonstrators in Colombia gathered outside the U.S. Embassy in Bogotá.
It is an attack on all of Latin America, and therefore all of Latin America must mobilize to confront and resist this onslaught of imperialism, which, as Trump himself said, is an imperialism that only seeks profits and oil without regard for human beings.
Meanwhile, the remains of 32 Cuban officers killed in the U.S. attack on Venezuela arrived in Havana, Cuba on Thursday. The officers were part of President Nicolas Maduro's security detail. Thousands of Cubans lined up the streets to pay respects as the island remains on high alert amidst escalating threats by the Trump administration. Here in the United States, right-wing Venezuelan opposition figure Maria Corina Machado met with President Trump at the White House Thursday, where Machado said she gave her Nobel Peace Prize to Trump. The pair posed for a photo in the Oval Office with Trump smiling as he displayed the medal in a large golden frame. Trump called the transfer a, quote, wonderful gesture of mutual respect, unquote. In response, the Nobel Peace Center wrote on social media, quote, a medal can change owners, but the title of a Nobel Peace Prize laureate cannot, unquote. The Washington Post previously reported President Trump was not willing to support Machado because she accepted the Peace Prize instead of rejected it. A source told the Post if she had turned it down and said, I can't accept it because it's Donald Trump, she'd be president of Venezuela today, unquote. Several European countries have deployed soldiers to Greenland after President Trump signaled he may seize the semi-autonomous Danish territory by force. The deployment by France, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Finland, the Netherlands, and the UK is largely symbolic, with only a few dozen personnel deployed alongside Danish forces for joint military exercises. Article 5 of NATO's charter says an armed attack against one member is considered an attack on all, but the charter does not specify a course of action if one NATO member attacks another. Israeli forces killed at least 10 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip Thursday, mostly in a series of airstrikes on residences. 2 homes were destroyed in an area of Deir al-Balah that was designated by Israel as a so-called safe zone. A third home was bombed in the Nuseirat refugee camp. Among the dead is a 62-year-old Palestinian woman killed by Israeli gunfire in southern Gaza. Israel's killed nearly 5 Palestinians per day on average since it agreed to a U.S.-brokered so-called ceasefire deal October 10th, bringing the death toll to 400 Palestinians and the number of injured to more than 1,250. since the truce. The latest killings came even as the Trump administration announced the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire agreement. President Trump announced Wednesday he'd form a so-called Board of Peace for Gaza with himself as chair, alongside a 15-member committee of Palestinian technocrats given the assignment of governing post-war Gaza. This, as the United Nations warned, it could take more than 7 years to clear over 60 million tons of rubble in Gaza that's piled up from more than 2 years of attacks by Israel. A federal appeals court has reversed a ruling that freed Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil from a Louisiana ICE jail in June. Advocates fear the move could pave the way for the Trump administration to re-arrest Khalil, now a Columbia University graduate who became the first pro-Palestinian campus protester to be jailed by Trump officials as part of a nationwide crackdown. We'll speak to Mahmoud Khalil later in the broadcast. President Trump's once again said the 2026 midterm election should be canceled because he expects his party to lose. Trump made the remark in a closed-door interview with Reuters, telling the news agency, quote, "It's some deep psychological thing, but when you win the presidency, you don't win the midterms." Trump continued, quote, "When you think of it, we shouldn't even have an election," unquote. It's at least the second time this month Trump has floated the idea. And in media news, some employees of CBS News expressed concern after their network cited 2 anonymous U.S. officials on Wednesday to report that the ICE officer who fatally shot Renee Good in Minneapolis suffered internal bleeding to the torso after the incident. That's according to The Guardian, citing internal emails which reveal top CBS News editor Barry Weiss expressed a high level of interest in the story on an editorial call on Wednesday. CBS News senior vice president David Ryder pushed back, writing, "I'm no doctor, but internal bleeding is a very broad term and can range in severity. We do know that the ICE agent walked away from the incident. We have that on camera," he said. This comes after CBS's new news anchor, Tony DeCopil, concluded his second-ever broadcast of the CBS Evening News with a lighthearted segment about Secretary of State Marco Rubio displaying AI-altered meme photos of Rubio and saluting him as the ultimate Florida man.
Rubio's hometown fans, which are many around here in Miami, it is a sign of how Florida, once an American punchline, has become a leader on the world stage. Marco Rubio, we salute you. You're the ultimate Florida man.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.